All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everyone.
Always fun to dig in.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the opening chapters of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett this week.
Classic.
It is a classic. You all sent in these excerpts, and I mean, what I thought would be really interesting is just to kind of go through it and pull out those little sparks of insight, those little key moments that Burnett builds in right from the start.
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating about the opening is how it really sets up such a s- a study in contrasts, right?
Yeah.
You've got colonial India, this intense, vibrant, almost oppressive environment,
Hmm.
and then it shifts so abruptly to the almost the brooding mystery of the Yorkshire moors,
Yeah.
and tracing those first experiences that Mary Lennox has as she enters that world and beginning to tease out those early threads of the secrets that Misselthwaite clearly holds. It's such a rich starting point.
Yeah, it is. And right away we get this jolt, right? This this sudden devastating cholera outbreak in India, it just tears through the household with terrifying speed.
And the way Burnett describes it,
Right.
it's just so matter of fact. There's that young man who remarks to Mrs. Lennox, "Awfully, Mrs. Lennox, you ought to have gone to the hills 2 weeks ago."
Yeah.
It's just, you could almost hear the clinking of glasses at the dinner party
Yeah.
right before this wave of illness crashes over everything.
Yeah, and Mrs. Lennox herself is so preoccupied with her social standing, she's more concerned about missing a silly dinner party than the actual severity of the situation.
Which really highlights the you know, almost callous indifference of the British ruling class at that time, right?
Absolutely. It's such a stark introduction to this world on the brink. And then, even more so, we get this eerie silence that descends after Mary sleeps through so much of the crisis.
Right.
She wakes up and the house is perfectly still, a quiet she's never encountered.
It's so unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, and what really struck me was her reaction to her Aya's death. No tears. Just a very self centered concern about who will care for her now.
It's telling, isn't it?
Very telling.
I mean, that lack of emotional response isn't just a quirk of her personality. It really speaks
Mhm.
volumes about the emotional aridity of her upbringing.
Oh,
In
yeah.
that colonial setting, children of the ruling class, they were often raised by servants, fostering a detachment rather than these deep familial bonds.
Right, right. And amidst this emptiness, we get this almost surreal image of a little snake in her room.
Oh yeah,
And she shows no fear. She sees it as harmless and in a hurry.
that's fascinating, isn't it?
It is a small moment, but I felt like it hinted at something more, a certain resilience maybe, or even just an emotional numbness to the chaos around her.
Right, and you could even say that her indifference to the snake almost symbolizes her detachment from the emotional turmoil that's engulfing her world. It's like the natural world, even a potentially dangerous element, doesn't really register as strongly as the human drama that she's been shielded from.
Yeah, yeah. And then comes the stark truth, right? Poor little kid. There is nobody left to come.
Oh.
Suddenly she's an orphan, the servants have vanished, and she's utterly alone in the silent bungalow.
And that's really the catalyst that propels her across the ocean to England, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is this pivotal moment of abandonment. And the journey to England isn't exactly filled with warmth.
Yeah.
We learn that even Mrs. Crawford observed Mary being neglected,
Right.
remarking, I believe she scarcely ever looked at her. So this pattern of indifference continues.
Underscoring that initial emotional state, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then the sea voyage is in the charge of an officer's wife who's far more invested in her own children. So Mary is essentially passed along
Right.
until she arrives in London. And then we have the grand entrance of Mrs. Medlock.
Oh, yeah. Mrs. Medlock.
What a character, right?
Oh, she's a fourth.
Stout red cheeks, sharp black eyes. Burnett gives us, this is so vivid.
Almost theatrical.
Yeah, a very purple dress,
Right.
black silk mantle with a jet fringe, and then that bonnet adorned with trembling purple velvet flowers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is. And Mary takes an instant dislike to her, and it's not hard to see why.
No, it's not.
She's not exactly the warm and fuzzy type, is she?
No, she's not. And I mean, it really sets the stage for that kind of, antagonistic relationship, right?
And it speaks to Mary's independent spirit, too.
Yeah, exactly. She's not going to be easily swayed.
No, not at all.
So the journey to Misselthwaite itself is hardly uplifting.
No.
Endless gray rain. It's so monotonous it puts Mary to sleep on the train.
It kind of mirrors her internal landscape at this point, doesn't it?
I think so. Just this sense of dullness and lack of vibrancy.
Absolutely.
And then we get Mrs. Medlock's rather blunt explanation of the moor.
Right.
It's a 5-mile drive across it in the dark, and it
Mm.
sounds bleak and unwelcoming. But then we get this wonderful contrast with Martha.
Oh, the young housemaid.
She's a breath of fresh air, isn't she?
She is. She's just bursting with life. I love her description of the moor.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Covered with growing things, it smells sweet. Honey, scent fresh air, a high sky, and then the sounds of bees and skylarks.
It's like she's painting this idyllic picture.
Yeah, and she clearly adores it. I wouldn't live away from the moor for anything.
And that love for the moor, it hints at the potential for connection, right, in this new environment.
Yeah, and it's such a direct counterpoint to Mary's initial perception.
Absolutely, and to Mrs. Medlock's, rather stark description.
Right. And Mary's immediate reaction, I hate it.
Oh, bless her heart.
But Martha, with this lovely grounded wisdom, just replies, "Thou will like it."
Yeah.
It's brief, but it feels like a small seed of hope being planted.
It is, and it's also just such a lovely introduction to that down-to-earth Yorkshire character.
Wow, it is, and their connection to the land.
Absolutely.
So once at the manor, Mary begins these aimless wanderings.
The house is massive, isn't it?
It is. It's huge, silent, and she's largely left to her own devices. And it's during this time that Martha casually mentions a locked garden.
Ah, yes, the locked garden.
That hasn't been open for 10 years.
It's the central mystery, isn't it?
It is, and it immediately sparks that sense of intrigue.
Oh, absolutely. In this vast, seemingly lifeless place, a secret garden holds so much promise.
Yeah, and fueled by this curiosity and her somewhat contrary nature, Burnett tells us she always did what she wanted to do. Mary starts exploring the grounds.
I love that about her.
I do too. She discovers several green doors and walls. There's no hesitation in her approach.
She's determined.
Very determined.
That's a significant step in her development, I think.
Yeah, it really is. It's showing a sense of agency that we haven't seen from her before.
Right, a proactiveness.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually she finds an open green door that leads to the orchard.
Okay.
Which is enclosed by walls, but there's no other apparent exit.
So another piece of the puzzle.
Another piece of the puzzle. And then we have this really charming encounter with a robin redbreast.
He perches on a tree above the wall, separating the orchard from an unseen area, and begins to sing.
I love that image.
Isn't it great? And it feels like this tiny clue is being offered to her. The robin is often a symbol of hope in literature, isn't it? Or a guide.
It is, and I definitely think that's at play here.
Yeah.
So her explorations lead her to Ben Weatherstaff, the old gardener.
Ah, Ben Weatherstaff. What a character.
He's gruff, quite taciturn, but clearly observant.
Oh, yes, very much so.
His interaction with the robin is fascinating. He treats it almost like a companion,
Right.
even referring to it as the head gardener.
Which really speaks to his connection to nature, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and it hints at a potentially warmer heart beneath that gruff exterior.
Right, right.
And then he delivers this wonderfully blunt assessment of Mary.
Oh, yeah.
Tha and me are a good bit alike. We was wove out of the same cloth. We're neither of us good looking, and we're both of us as sour as we look. We've got the same nasty tempers, both of us, I'll warrant. And for Mary, who's only ever known the formal interactions of colonial households, this directness is shocking.
It's a real turning point for her, I think.
Yeah, she's forced to confront her own unpleasantness.
Which is probably something that's never happened before.
Never, and it really prompts her to think about herself.
Right, and that uncomfortable self-reflection is crucial for her growth.
It is. It's that first step toward potential change.
Absolutely.
And what's intriguing is Ben's surprise when Mary speaks kindly to the robin.
Right.
He compares her to a boy named Dickon, saying she sounded as nice and human as him.
So another intriguing figure emerges.
Yeah, and it immediately sparks Mary's curiosity, especially when Ben mentions that everybody knows him on the moor, and even the wild creatures trust him.
And that really piques her interest, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So now, in addition to this secret garden, we have this Dickon who she's starting to wonder about.
And it gives her more reason to engage with her surroundings.
Exactly.
With the world outside.
So despite these little glimmers of interest, Mary's initial days at Misselthwaite are still largely monotonous.
Yeah, but she is starting to realize that being outside is the best option.
Yeah.
Even if she doesn't quite know why.
Right. And we see a physical change in her. She's getting stronger from her walks and runs in the fresh air, even though she dislikes the wind.
That's such a nice detail, isn't it?
I think so.
It speaks to that restorative power of nature.
Yeah, even without her conscious awareness.
Exactly. It's subtly working on her.
Yeah, and her quest for the locked garden continues.
Right.
Her conversation with Ben confirms its existence,
Okay.
but also that there's no visible door and that Mr. Craven himself buried the key. So now we have even more questions. Why was it locked? Why was the key hidden?
It suggests a deliberate act of concealment, doesn't it?
It does.
A deeper emotional significance
Yeah.
than just a simple locked space.
Right. Right. And then Martha reveals this really poignant story behind the locked garden. It was Mrs. Craven's beloved place, created early in their marriage. They spent countless happy hours there.
Right.
But then a terrible accident occurred. A branch she was sitting on broke. She fell and tragically died the next day.
Oh.
And Mr. Craven was utterly devastated.
And has hated the garden ever since.
Yeah, and has forbidden anyone from entering or even mentioning it.
That's heartbreaking, isn't it?
So heartbreaking. So now the garden becomes a symbol of loss and grief.
And his desire to shut it off from the world
Right.
is a manifestation of his attempt to bury his own pain.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And inside the vast, silent manor, Mary continues her aimless explorations. She encounters numerous rooms filled with old portraits,
Right.
furniture, and one of the things that struck me was this recurring portrait of a stiff, plain little girl, rather like herself.
Interesting.
Yeah, and in this seemingly desolate house, she makes a small but significant discovery: a gray mouse with her tiny babies nestled in a cushion.
Oh, sweet.
It's this small pocket of vibrant life amidst all the stillness.
And it offers a contrast to the perceived emptiness of the house, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And then Mary hears it.
Here's what.
This faint sound of crying.
Oh.
She's certain of it. But when she encounters Mrs. Medlock,
Right.
the housekeeper dismisses it and confines her to her room.
Oh.
But Mary remains convinced of what she heard.
So another layer of intrigue.
Yeah. Who could be crying and why is it being kept secret?
Exactly.
It's so well done.
It's brilliant.
And throughout all this, Mary has these really telling interactions with Martha.
With Martha.
Yeah, Martha clearly has a deep affection for her brother Dickon.
Oh, she adores him.
She does, and she vividly describes his connection with animals.
Which is just magical, isn't it?
It is, and then
Yeah.
she poses this really insightful question to Mary. I wonder what Dickon would think of thee.
Cool.
It's like she's prompting Mary to consider how she's perceived by others.
Right. Something she's probably never thought about.
Never. And Mary's response is so direct. He wouldn't like me. No one does.
Oh, Mary.
It's heartbreaking.
It is, but Martha doesn't let her off the hook, does she?
No. She comes back with an even more direct question. How does the like thyself?
Whoa.
And Mary's honest answer that she doesn't is a moment of genuine self-awareness.
It is.
Something she hadn't actually contemplated before.
And that's the essential first step, isn't it?
It is that recognition that she's unhappy.
To wanting to change.
Yeah.
To finding self-acceptance.
Exactly. And Martha then shares this relatable story about her own mother asking her the same thing, which set her senses in a minute.
It's so lovely, isn't it?
It's just this down-to-earth moment of wisdom.
And it shows how alike they are,
Right.
even though they come from such different backgrounds.
And then they discuss spring bulbs.
Okay.
And Mary's complete unfamiliarity with them because of her life in India really underscores the contrast between the two environments.
Right. She's never experienced the changing seasons in the same way.
Never. And when Mary asks Ben Weatherstaff about the garden with the old rose trees, wanting to know if any flowers ever bloom there again, he just grunts and tells her to ask him, nodding towards the robin.
The robin.
Adding, he's the only one as knows. No one else has seen inside it for 10 years.
So the robin becomes even more closely linked to the secret.
Right. It's like this recurring symbol.
Yeah, like a keeper of secrets almost.
Yeah, and then in this truly delightful scene, the robin begins persistently following Mary.
Ah, sweet.
And she's so happy, feeling this sense of being remembered and declaring him prettier than anything else in the world.
It's a real turning point for her emotionally.
It is.
For the first time, she's experiencing a genuine connection with another living being.
Right, and it's really fundamental to her transformation.
Absolutely.
So finally, after all this intrigue and searching,
Yeah.
we reach the big moment. Mary discovers the key in a newly made molehill.
She found it.
Her excitement is palpable.
Oh, I bet.
She immediately assumes it belongs to the locked garden,
Of what?
and true to her independent spirit, plans to open it in secret for her own private adventures.
So the key is just the beginning.
It's the culmination of all that initial curiosity and exploration.
And the fact that she wants to keep it a secret shows her growing sense of ownership.
Yeah, she wants a space that's entirely her own.
And that just beautifully sets the stage for the next chapter.
It does. So to bring it all together, Mary has journeyed from loss and neglect in India to the mysterious Misselthwaite Manor. Her fascination with the locked garden has been ignited, and she's starting to navigate this new world.
Right, encountering its unique inhabitants
And its secrets.
and all those unsettling hints of another presence within the manor walls.
Yeah, and that leaves us with this to consider. What does Mary's discovery of the key truly signify? How might this neglected garden and the secrets that surround it impact her and the other inhabitants of Misselthwaite?
Good question.
What kind of transformative power might lie dormant within those hidden walls? I think we're on the verge of some really profound discoveries.
Oh, I think so too. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
Yes, all right, so until next time, happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.